The Mabo Case by Edward Lindsay. Warning: this presentation may contain images and names of deceased people that may cause sadness or distress to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians, the Palawa people whose land we are on today. I acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal community who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture, and Aboriginal rights. I also recognise the value of continuing Aboriginal knowledge and cultural practice, which informs our understanding of history, culture, science, environment, and supporting the development of the Tasmanian community. So, why do an acknowledgement of country? Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures have welcomed visitors with certain protocols for many thousands of years. Despite the lack of fences or visible borders, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander groups had clear boundaries separating the country from other groups. When crossing these borders, they required permissions to enter. When permissions were granted, they would welcome them by giving them safe passage and allow them to understand the specific protocols for their land. An acknowledgement to country is an opportunity for anyone to show respect for traditional owners, whilst continuing the traditions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to country. There are no set protocols or wording for acknowledgement of country. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have experienced a long history of exclusion from Australian history books, the Australian flag, the Australian anthem, and for many years, Australian democracy. This history of dispossession and colonisation lies at the heart of the disparity between Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, and non-Indigenous Australians today. Native title, and what is it? Native title is the recognition that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have rights and interests to land and waters according to their traditional law and customs set out in Australian law. Native title is governed by the Native Title Act 1993. Native title was introduced into law as a result of the historic Mabo decision, in which the High Court ruled that Australia was not a terra nullius, a land belonging to no one, at the time of European colonisation. The decision recognised Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as being Australia's first people, that their rights and interests in the land and waters continue to exist despite settlement. Native title may include rights and interests to live on the land area, erect shelters and structures, access the area for traditional purposes like camping or ceremonies, visit and protect important places and sites, hunt, fish, gather food or traditional resources like bush medicine, water, and wood, teach law, custom, and engage in cultural activities. Today, we are going to talk about a man called Eddie Mabo. Eddie was born on the 29th of June 1936 at Lass-on-Mer in the islands off Queensland. He was a Torres Strait Islander community leader and a lands rights campaigner. When the British arrived in 1788, they claimed ownership of the entire Australian continent. The way the Europeans saw the situation was there had been indigenous people here for many thousands of years. However, they thought of them as nomads, without any property, social organisation, or any systems of law. The British decided to hold Australia as a terra nullius, meaning land belonging to no one. This also included the Torres Strait Islands. In 1981, Eddie Mabo and other Torres Strait Islanders decided to fight for their ancestral rights on Mer, which the British had decided to rename Murray Island. They took their argument and the Australian government to court. This case became known as the Mabo case. What they wanted was the acknowledgement of native title and the complex customary patterns of the land ownership, inheritance, and use that predated colonisation. The main point of the case was Marlowe. Marlowe was a Miriam god, represented as an octopus, and this god gave them their laws. This meant that when the British tried to take ownership of the entire Australian continent, because there were no laws, there were in fact laws already, meaning Australia was not a terra nullius. In 1992, the court ruled in favour of the Murray Islanders. This ruling recognised their equality before the law and obligated Australia to respect the Miriam Law. In doing so, it marked a new way for Australia to view its long history and future. Eddie Mabo has been rightfully recognised for his landmark work. Unfortunately, when this law passed, Eddie had passed away. Unfortunately, the recognition only occurred after his death, with a number of awards including, in 1992, the Australian Human Rights Medal as a part of the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission. In 1993, the Australian newspaper voted Eddie Mabo as their 1992 Australian of the Year. In 2008, the James Cook University named its library the Eddie Kaweki Mabo Library, and this is where Eddie Mabo did most of his work. In 2012, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation aired a documentary based on his life. This is available on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the description below. And Mabo Day, named after Eddie himself, is celebrated on the 3rd of June each year. Next, I'd like you to watch a video called The Mabo Anniversary that ABC News Australia put together a few years ago. The photo that you can see in the screen is of Benita Mabo. Benita was the wife of Eddie Mabo and was a fundamental figure in Eddie's life when he was in the process of challenging the High Court for native title. Unfortunately, Benito Mabo passed away on the 27th of November 2018, which in regards to this video was yesterday. I'll put a link in the description below and I'd like you to head over and watch that now. Thank you. As pre-service teachers, it's our role to grow and develop the minds in the classroom. That's where the Australian Professional Standards for Teaching comes in. The standards let you know what you should be aiming to achieve and at every stage of your career, so you can improve your practice inside and outside the classroom. When teaching about Eddie Mabo and the Mabo case, we're looking at Standard 1.4, Strategies for Teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Students. This demonstrates a broad knowledge and understanding of the impact of culture, cultural identity, and linguistic background on the education of students from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds. It also looks at Standard 2.4, Understand and Respect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, to promote reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. And this demonstrates a broad knowledge of, understanding of, and respect for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, cultures, and languages. Key cultural considerations. Cultural awareness is of utmost importance to achieve acceptance. Questions to consider when teaching about Eddie Mabo and the Mabo case would be, do we have any Aboriginal students from the Murray Islands, or are there any Aboriginal students that are local that would like to be involved? To be able to be culturally responsible, terminology is very important. There is terminology that is used in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities that is not acceptable for non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders to use. With correct terminology, it shows respect for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history and cultures. We must use strength-based talk to speak back to deficit talk. It is fundamental to teach students about the impacts of stereotyping, as it can be detrimental to students' health and well-being. As teachers, we must approach this strength-based talk. Through this, we can start making a difference today. Cultural differentiation is paramount for students to have in their learning. When this is integrated correctly, students have the ability to discover their own cultural identity. It is understood that when students have their own language and culture incorporated into their learning, they achieve their best results. To enable teachers to incorporate culturally responsive pedagogies, it is imperative that they have a complex knowledge of self. Entering the classroom, one must be aware of knowledge of self for them to adaptively engage in culturally responsive pedagogies. Teachers must gain an in-depth understanding of who they are and who their students are. This is achieved through critical self-reflection. There are 4 key pedagogical considerations teachers must include in their practices to ensure a respectable and ethical approach is maintained. Teachers must be aware of any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that are in the class. With this, correct terminology is paramount for a respectable environment. Teachers must be aware of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that are not in the class, making sure we don't create assumptions. If racism is presented in the class, it must be handled in a quickly and respectful way. The best way to face these issues in the classroom is to be prepared using strength-based talk. The addressing of misconception and redirection is an effective tool to use. Quite often, these lessons may lead into other topics revolving around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Listen to these and take note, as they may be a good place to start future lessons in the classroom. The 8 ways of Aboriginal learning pedagogy is story sharing, learning maps, non-verbal, symbols and images, land links, non-linear, deconstruction, reconstruction and community links. The yarning story that has been told incorporates story sharing and land links. One of the key components to the 8 ways of learning is story sharing. This is not only a significant pedagogical approach to learning, but one that links closely to Aboriginal oral culture. Through Aboriginal history, elders taught children through the use of stories. This captivated their learners and actively involved them in introspection. This was seen to be not monological, but a shared interaction with learners. Aboriginal pedagogy through teaching and learning is social activity. The Mabo story tells a tale of a Torres Strait Islander man with the ambitions to change the history and future of his culture. It goes through step-by-step process and using dialogue and pictures to explain what this great man has achieved. Story sharing is not confined to history or English and is used in mainstream classrooms across Australia. We encourage students to share their knowledge, experiences on all content. The other of the 8 ways of learning is land links. This pedagogy is all about connecting and relating classroom learning to the land. The connection Aboriginals have with the land has been widely documented and is known to be a thing they cherish the most about their culture. Aboriginal pedagogies are extremely ecological and place-based. This is drawn from the living landscape framework. Aboriginal learning is about linking content to the local land and place, which is highly contextual. The way Mabo's story is told is specifically incorporating land links into the story. This is done through his land rights campaign to reclaim the land that was taken away from his ancestors.